All right, go right ahead.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. Good morning to everyone out there. My name is Benjamin Starr. I work at the Office of Migrant Education for the U.S. Department of Education, and I'm the MSIX team lead. So today we're presenting about MSIX with a specific focus on MEP data entry specialists. And I just put my email address in the chat, so please feel free to reach out to me with any questions or concerns you have about anything MSIX related or otherwise concerning the MEP. We have program officers that work with all the states, so we're more than happy to help you work through anything that comes up. Next slide, please. All right, and I'm presenting, the other main speaker today is going to be Sarah Storms, who works at Deloitte. And Sarah, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, everyone. As Ben said, my name is Sarah Storms, and I have been supporting the MSIX project for about 5 years now. I am the MSIX operations and security lead, and I think I've interfaced with many people as I help a lot of states with their child count reconciliation processes. So I'm excited to be here today and present.
And Sarah, would you mind putting the help desk information in the chat? I don't know if we included that in the presentation, but I think that'd be really good for folks.
We may not have, but I will absolutely put that in now.
Wonderful, thank you. And if you contact the help desk and the help desk doesn't know how to help, can't resolve your issue, you may end up talking with Sarah at some point. So, but the help desk is really good, and we encourage you to reach out to them. They get lots of inquiries via email, over the phone. So feel free to reach out to them or Sarah or me. Next slide, please. Okay, here's just a quick run through of the agenda. We're going to do an overview of the system, then talk about the regulations and their associated timelines. We'll go over the MSIX MBEs and how to do the consolidated student record search. Then we're going to talk about the data requests and move notices. Move notices is one of the most highly used features of MSIX. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the reports and the dashboards and have some special guests. We've got Bruce and Michelle from Michigan and Vaughn from Pennsylvania are going to talk about some of the reports that they have found to be most useful in their work. And then we'll have a Q&A session. All right, next, please. Okay, just a quick reminder that the information in MSIX is, a lot of it is personally identifiable information. And so it's important not to share that information unencrypted or with people who are not permitted or authorized to have that information. Some people are authorized to have the information, and so you can share it. You still shouldn't be sending unencrypted emails. That's one that probably the most common PII issue we get is people send emails to the help desk with like screenshots, and that's like a no-no because someone could intercept that, and we just don't want to have that happen. All right, next, please. Okay, just to get us started, a quick icebreaker. How many people did you eat Thanksgiving dinner with? Sarah, how many people did you eat Thanksgiving? Oh, Nancy, 17. That beats mine. I was 15.
I'm only 8. I have a pretty small family.
Vaughn, how many people? Thanksgiving dinner? 5. Bruce, how many? Thanksgiving?
15.
15. 22, I think, is the highest that I've seen so far.
I saw a 67.
67. Oh my gosh. Wow.
Priscilla.
I'd have to buy a second house to do that.
55.
Wow.
Feliciano.
Wow. The person who said 67, how did you go somewhere? Like, was it at a hall or something? Wow. That's pretty good. Okay. Next, please. And now a little bit more work-related question. How often do you log into MSIX? Sarah, how often do you log into MSIX?
I am probably every day, Monday through Friday, for something.
All right, every work day. Very good. Bruce, how often do you log into MSIX?
Pretty close to every day, almost every day.
Right. Vaughn?
I'm somewhere between every day and about once a week. It kind of depends on what's going on. Usually at least once a week, but sometimes it could be several times a day. It depends on what's going on.
Good. Good. Do you have your, I don't have my MSIX password quite memorized yet. I still like to check it before I log in, but because as I actually once did do the wrong password 3 times in a row and got locked out of MSIX, which was a little embarrassing to have to call the help desk to get my account unlocked. So I tried to.
We've all done it, Ben. It's okay.
I get scared because my 3-day warning happened over the holiday, and I said, okay, so if I mess this up, then I'm locked out for good, but I got it reset. Okay, so.
You're good, Vaughn. You can still reset your own password. You have
I know.
30-day grace to reset your own.
Worst case,
Lucia, yeah, the auto reset feature.
one of my other state user admins, but I got it myself.
Great. Ben, it looks like we're getting a lot of every day to about once a week. We do have some new people here who have either never logged in or have only logged in a couple times. So looks like we have a wide variety of users here with us today.
Excellent, excellent. All right, next slide, please, Melissa. Okay, so now we're just going to give a quick overview of the system. Next, please. MSIX is a web-based application that links state migrant systems. So the 46 states that have MEPs have their own state-specific migrant database, and those 46 systems all send information into MSIX. MSIX then takes the information, like let's say there's a student who's been to Texas, Florida, and North Carolina. It will then take the information that those 3 states have sent for that student and consolidate it into one student record. And the goal of MSIX is to help with enrollment, placement, and credit accrual, as well as participation in the MEP. We do have a lot of recruiters that use the information from MSIX to help get students in the program so they can get the services that are out there to benefit them. Next slide, please. Okay, and here's just a quick overview of the way it works. Again, we've got the state systems in the upper left-hand corner. MIS 2000 is the big one that a lot of states use now. NGS used to be a system. Some states have a customized system, and then they send files to the MSIX system. MSIX then takes them, processes the file, and then the end users can log into MSIX and view student data, as well as some state or district level data, depending on their role and permissions. Sarah, anything to add on that one?
No, nothing to add there. I guess just a quick note that MSIX is just a consolidation of the data from the state systems, and we don't have direct data entry other than a little bit of correspondence features on some of our work list items, so that the data that you do see did come directly from the states. So we always encourage everybody to keep their state system up to date and to do regular file submissions up to date so that MSIX does have the most accurate and timely data that your state has.
All right, perfect. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to switch and talk about the MSIX regulations and their associated timelines. Next. Okay, the MSIX regulations, the final regulations were passed on May 10th, 2016. So if you Google MSIX Regulations Federal Register, you can pull up the official regulations. There's a website that has them all written out, as well as you can download a PDF that's like 30 pages long that has all the comments that OME went through, the back and forth with stakeholders, and our rationale for why the regulations ended up being the way they are, as well as the regulations themselves are towards the end, actually. They're like the last 4 or 5 pages of that 30-page PDF. And some legal references. And before 2016, the submission of data to MSIX was optional, but now it's required after starting in 2016. Next, please. Okay, so the idea behind the MSIX regulations is that the electronic exchange of education and health data according to standard timelines and procedures will help ensure that migratory children can succeed academically. The full potential and the success of the system is really dependent on 2 factors. One is the information getting into the system. So the states have to get it into their systems, which then upload into MSIX. And then someone has to go and use it. So the regulations are mostly focused on getting the information into the system in a complete and timely fashion so that when someone goes to use it, the information is there. Because if people are going into MSIX and the information isn't there, then what's the point? Next slide, please. Okay, so as a condition of receiving the MEP grants, each SEA must collect and maintain the MDEs. And we're not going to go into too much detail about the MDEs today. They are listed inside of MSIX. There is a document that details all 73 current MDEs. There used to be 76, but 3 of them are no longer collected or no longer required. And I believe there's a session later today that goes into more detail about the MDEs. And each SEA must ensure that the data submitted to MSIX are accurate and complete. That's one thing that OME at the federal level monitors, that each state has policies and procedures in place to ensure that the data is accurate and complete. And in addition to the SEAs having to ensure that they have proper procedures, they're required to establish procedures for requiring their subgrantees to use MSIX and the MSIX consolidated student records. And then there are also requirements for establishing procedures for data correction. If a parent were to see their child's student record and say something's wrong with it, there are rules about how quickly the data has to be corrected. Next slide, please. Okay, so SEAs don't have to submit every single MDE for every single child. You know, we understand that first graders may not have formal state assessment data, but the regulations say applicable MDEs for all migratory children. And that would be a good question. If you ever have a question about that, you could reach out to someone at the state level or to me, and we could certainly point you in the right direction about what is required for different students. And it is regardless of the type of school, so public, private, or homeschool, as well as out-of-school youth, which is a substantial percentage of the student population we serve. Next, please. And here is a breakdown of some of the regulations. We didn't put all of them here, but these are some of the most relevant. Number one, migratory children with newly approved COEs. The information is required to be in MSIX within 10 working days. And then 2 and 3, the difference there is 2 is in-state secondary school records, and we're talking about 10 working days there. And then 3 is out-of-state secondary school records, and that's within 30 days of receipt of the record. Next slide, please. 4 is an important one. It's about the end of term submissions, about getting the grades into the system so that when the student moves, if they move over the summer, the next school year, that data is in the system and they can find it and figure out exactly where the student's supposed to be. And especially in high school, it's really important for that data to be in the system because any misplacement can have bigger consequences. And with a student population that's already at risk academically, any kind of error in that way could have bigger consequences than for other students. And so the deadline is within 30 days of the end of a district's fall, spring, summer, or intersession term. So 30 days. If the fall semester ends in January, the data has to be in by February. If it ends in June, the data has to be in by July. And then 5 is about, yes, Julissa, good question. They are posted in Whova, actually. I went and downloaded them there myself, so I know they're available. If you go into Whova, you can get the slides there. Good question. And then 5, for a change of residence within 4 working days of receiving the notification is when the data has to be entered. Next slide, please. Okay, so we talked about getting the data into the system, and we know that people, move around a lot. And not talking about the migratory students themselves, talking about the people working. We know a lot of the users of MSIX are new users. You've been using it for less than a year, 1 or 2 years, and there's a lot of turnover at the state level. I know state directors change fairly often in some states. Some have been around for a long time, but also some change pretty regularly. So it's important to have written down policies and procedures to ensure that the data gets inputted in a timely manner. So at this time, I would ask to, oh, Jessica maybe shared a file. Good, thank you. I would ask to please put into the chat examples of how your state ensures data gets inputted into MSIX in a timely manner. Are there any specific practices or procedures that go on in your state to ensure that this happens according to the regulations? And while we wait for that, Vaughn and Bruce, oh, Tonda said uploads nightly. Good. Vaughn or Bruce, would one of you care, or Michelle, care to weigh in on this one while folks put stuff into the chat? Because people, the audience can't come off mute, and you are presenters, so you can.
I guess I went first. So I can't say threat of bodily harm, even though sometimes we do that. But it basically comes down to, we have people who are monitoring the data, and we know certain things need to be in at certain times. And we run various reports from our state MIS 2000 system, and we look for gaps. And if we see something's missing, we will send out information to our regional sites. Each regional site has a data specialist, and our data specialists in Pennsylvania are yes, they do some data entry, but they're really much more data managers, and they're looking at the data. They're, most of the data entry is done by, we have electronic COEs, we do our services and needs electronically. So our field staff are doing that, and that puts a different spin on our data specialists. They're really, yes, they do some data entry, but they're looking at what's going on, and they're running reports to see, hey, we're missing this, we're missing that. So a lot of it just comes down to looking for gaps in the data, and then reaching out to the people responsible for it to say, hey, you have not loaded this, or you have not loaded that. We're seeing lots of students that don't have this from your caseload, and get that to them. And that's how we keep track of it. And again, if worst case is we don't threaten them with bodily harm, we threaten them that we'll notify the state director that you're not doing your job. And that puts the fear of God in them. Then they get their data in.
Excellent. Thank you, Vaughn. Thank you. Bruce, anything to add?
Yeah, I think that, it happens at two levels, and one of it all of us can control, and the other one is kind of at a more higher level. We make sure at the state level that the two systems, or three systems in our case, are communicating regularly. They do upload nightly, like a lot of people are saying, but there's a good communication between the vendor and the admins and all that stuff to make sure that they're monitoring that on a regular basis and looking for any kind of anomalies that happen, and then tracking that down. And our vendor's been very good at helping us do that. On the other side, we have a very strong quality control process as far as entering COEs and entering data, and it goes through various levels. And at each one of those levels, people are looking to make sure that we're aware of those timelines, we're training on those timelines, and we're meeting those timelines in our state.
Excellent. Thank you both. And thank you to everyone for entering into the chat. I see a lot of action in the chat. And it's different in the different states, how everyone operation-wise, it certainly is different. And in a country as vast as ours, with so many different states with various degrees of local control, it's understandable that different states have different policies and practices. All right, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to take over the next section.
Thank you, Ben. So in this section today, we'll be discussing a little bit more about the MDEs. I heard that there was a session later that's really deep diving into them. I'm just giving kind of a brief overview and what MSIX looks for when your state submits files, and then what happens after the MDs are submitted. How do you search for students once their records have been uploaded to MSIX? So as we do go through this section, I would like you to think about how you use the student record search function today, or if you are a new user after we present this, how it might be helpful to you in the future. Next slide, Melissa. Okay, so a bit busy here, but MDE's minimum data elements are the data that the states must collect and maintain in their migrant student databases in order to make that data available to other states via MSIX. As Ben mentioned, there are technically 73 data elements or MDEs right now. The system will accept up to 76. That includes the 3 birth location MDEs that are no longer required. As Ben mentioned earlier, per the MSIX regulations, states are required to transmit these MDEs for new migrant children added to their state, or for any child whose information has changed in the state's migrant database since the MDEs were last transmitted to MSIX. And we do have a little picture here of the overview of the application architecture that we showed earlier. So data transmission from the state's migrant databases to MSIX does happen through secure file transfer. And as we saw in the chat box, many states do submit this data nightly. Others are weekly. And I know there's some other states that have it triggered. They're smaller programs. And so they trigger submissions just when data changes in their state migrant database. Next slide, Melissa. Okay, so the MDE list. The MDE list can be found in the MSIX system. It is only found after logging in. So if you don't have account credentials, please reach out to your state user representatives and they can get you access. All users who do have MSIX do have access to this. It's under the resources and then the technical references. And we do post the latest version of the approved MDE list. So information that can be found in the MDE list is the definition of the MDE, accepted values. Some of the MDEs have some additional information to clarify the requirements or if there's dependencies on other MDEs. And then finally, we also list the MDE category. These include things like QAD, assessments, or course history. Next slide. So in MSIX, when a file is submitted from your state to our system, we do a 3-step data validation process. The whole point of this is just to make sure that the data that your state is submitting is as valid as it should be. And then there also has to be a certain number of mandatory MDEs that are submitted. So you can actually see those listed here. There's approximately 10 MDEs that are completely mandatory. MDE has to be there and be valid. And then you'll see at least one of the dates that's down there has to also be entered for the student record. So all files submitted by the state do go through a 3-step data validation process. This includes a file header check. That's just something that the technical resources from your state will know what that is. And then that's followed by an MDE check. And then that finishes with the generation of 2 outbound response files. One's called the outbound response interface, and the other one is called the outbound response error interface. And these outbound response files do provide your state technical contacts with any information on rejected student records and invalid MDEs. And we had actually heard, and we'll be discussing a little bit later on, a file submission report. And we made some updates to that in MSIX, as we know a lot of our state data specialists weren't getting the same information that the state technical contacts were getting. And so we did update that report to provide some of this information that's in those outbound response files to our data people so that you can better communicate with your technical resources. So each MDE of each student record that's submitted from your state is checked for both completeness and validity. MDEs are considered incomplete if the MDE value is missing or is null. And then MDEs are considered invalid if the MDE value is present but not in the specified format. An example could be an M6 ID. We were expecting a set of numbers. If for some reason a letter got added to that MDE would be invalid. And mandatory MDEs, the ones listed here, as well as non-mandatory demographic MDEs that are incomplete or invalid will result in the full student record being rejected. So this means that no MDEs that you submitted for that child get uploaded into M6. All other incomplete or invalid non-mandatory MDEs, so those ones that are not listed here, they will only reject the specific MDE value. We won't reject the full student record. So that just means that the student record will be uploaded, and maybe just certain MDEs that you submitted from your state, you won't see them in the consolidated student record. We did design M6 to be as flexible as possible. So we definitely try to upload as much data as possible, even if it is in an invalid format. We try not to reject the full student record whenever possible. Okay, so here we kind of talked about the MDEs. Next, we're going to take a look about how once that student record's gotten into M6, how do you search for that student? Okay, so next slide. One quick note, we do have multiple user roles within the M6 system. You can have a data administrator role, a user administrator role, primary user, secondary user. Multiple roles can do multiple things. And when we talk about some of these features that are in M6, they may not be available to all user roles. So student record search is something that is not available to user administrators. But the good thing is majority of user administrators in the system do have a secondary role, such as data admin, that does allow them to have student record search. So very rarely, especially with student record access, you'll find somebody that doesn't have access to that. So student record search is actually something, Ben, did you have something you wanted to add there?
Sure, and you can change your user roles. Also, if you find that you don't have access to a certain type of information that you need to do your job, you can ask the state to change it.
Yes, and your state user administrators, there is a state contact search. If you put in your state and your, I believe it's your district, it will pop out all of the user administrators in your state. So those are the people that if you have any questions about the user roles that you do have within the system about the functionality, you can access. If you have any questions, please contact them. The M6 help desk, just as a quick note, can't make changes to your user account. That has to be done by an M6 user within your state. Okay, so when you log into M6 right there on the home screen, you are going to see the student record search. The one that you see on the home screen right now, that's what we call the basic search that allows you to search by first name, last name, date of birth, or one of the 3 IDs listed there. So the M6, the state, or the alternate. We call all of these search fields that you see listed here, these are all standalone search fields, which means that you can actually just search by any one of them. If you know a couple letters of the first name, you can enter that here and then hit search. The one thing for date of birth to note is you can't just enter a month and a day, you do actually need a year. Otherwise, if you just enter the month, day, year, you can search for that without any of the other fields listed. On the screen there, you do see we have an arrow highlighting our advanced search. If you do select the advanced search, you're taken to the next screen. where you're presented with several more search criteria. These include parent information with something that's actually something that we've added, I believe, within the last year or two, based on request from users like you. You can now search on parent information. We still have the ability for states that did send in birth location information. You can still search on that, district of residence or school district, school or project name, and more. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, search fields such as first name, last name, ID are all standalone fields. In addition, parent name, so parent first name and parent last name are also standalone fields here. And parent first name and last name will search both the parent one and parent two. So if you're not sure how they were entered, parent one or parent two, that doesn't matter. As long as you enter one of the fields, you're all good. It will search both. Some helpful hints actually when you're doing a student record search is we actually allow you to run what are called wildcard searches. So this allows you to search using only partial information. If you only know, for example, the first few characters of a child's name, or the child may have a special character in their name and you weren't sure if that character was actually uploaded into the system or not, you can type in the characters that you know and then add a percentage sign. And then when you click search, that will return any student records with fields that match what you had searched for.
Sarah, there was a question.
Yeah,
There was a question in the chat
absolutely.
from LaRonda about the wildcard search. Does that work for date of birth as well?
That does not work for date of birth. So I would recommend is if you don't have the year for the child's birthday, if you do have the months and the days, if there's anything else that you know, you could enter the first few characters of the child's first name or last name along with that month and date, and that could get there. Thanks, Loranda. And then one also thing to note, if you believe that that student record has been uploaded to MSIX, but you are just not finding it, one thing that is critical to check is your near matches. So these are student records that will be uploaded to MSIX, but very closely resemble another student record that's already been included in MSIX. So what will happen there is we will flag that as a near match, and it's up to a data administrator in your state to go in to review that record and either say, yes, that matches, this should be the new MSIX ID, or nope, that's not a match, please create a new one. So that's something, if you're really not finding that student record, be sure to have a data administrator check the near matches. So once you've conducted your search and found the student you're looking for, next slide, please, you'll get access to their MSIX consolidated student record. So this is the bread and butter of what MSIX is and what it does. It consolidates all of the child's information for all of the different states that uploaded data. You'll see here we have the most recent qualifying move information that's at the top. We also, within the last year or two, updated to put academic information. So if a state had submitted that the child completed Algebra 1, that'll be listed here. If the child had a graduation date or indicator entered, that'll be listed here as well. What you can't see just due to size limitations, we also include all the state's enrollments, all course history, and all assessments are all listed on the consolidated student record. So there's some really there's some great features that you can use here. You can send a move notice or data request, flag the record for merge, or export the record for printing and save the student record to a custom list. So one thing To note is we did update the export not that long ago. I believe that was actually back in September. So the Consolidated Student Record Report is what we call the PDF export, and you can now customize what you see there. Users were requesting that especially if a child's been enrolled in the MEP since elementary school and they're now a secondary age student, sometimes that elementary school information is not relevant. Now you can set grades, you can set timelines, you can request additional guidance, and then it all can be done from the export PDF option. I am going to keep moving on, but in the chat as we do move on, if you can give us an example about how you use the student record search function, any helpful hints and tips you can give to our new users, that would be great. So while that happens, I am going to move on to two important tools that should be used for interstate and interstate communication. These are our data requests and our move notices. Melissa, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. Okay, and moving on to the next one. Okay, so data request. Data requests are used to request additional information to serve a migratory child. And when we say additional information, these are MDEs that may have not yet been submitted by the state. This can be final grades, updated course history. So for example, a child has arrived in your state and you notice that the child's record is missing the current course history information, such as grade to date or clock hours, even though that child did leave their previous school in the middle of the semester. You can use the data request link on the student's record to ask the sending state or district to submit this information to MSIX. And we do highly encourage you to send it over data request through MSIX. Per the MSIX regulations, it does mandate that you get a response in 4 days. That we have a correspondence feature that does keep a record of the conversation about that student record. It also keeps personal data secure. So you're not transmitting student record information over email. It's all done within the safety of the MSIX system. And MSIX takes the trouble of trying to find who you should talk to for you. So we do automatically route data requests to active data administrators within the state so that they can respond to your request. The other feature briefly discussed today, if you go to the next slide, is move notices. So this is definitely another powerful tool for both inter and intrastate coordination. At its basics, a move notice gives you the ability to alert another state, district, or school that a child has or will be or already has changed their location. In your area, when a child is changing location, they're either moving to or from your location. And therefore, you can also send move to notices, notifying recipients that a migratory child has moved or is moving to the recipient's area, or move from notices, notifying recipients that a migratory child has moved out of their area and into yours. So some important considerations for move notices. Most user roles can initiate a move notice, but only data administrators can receive, reassign, or dismiss these notifications. And data administrators can reassign if they believe that the move notice has not been routed accordingly. And we do encourage all MEP programs to establish procedures so that MSIX move notices are handled promptly. The move notice functionality also does include a correspondence feature similar to our data request functionality. And this is extremely valuable to provide any additional information that you can. Some examples that we've heard people ask for is a family's contact information, whether that's a phone number or an email address, so that the receiving area can more quickly and easily identify and recruit the family for enrollment in the MEP. One and other important note about move notices is please put as much data as you have as necessary. For example, just saying in the move notice that a child is moving to California does not help route that move notice to the people that should probably get it. California is a very large state. So if you know a county, a district, a region, a school, any additional information that you can add to that move notice is super helpful as well to make sure that the family is found. Michelle and Maria did comment that the family's contact information is useful and that they have seen more contact information provided. So that's awesome. Thank you for that. Again, as we are moving forward, I know I was running a bit behind on time, so I want to make sure we cover everything today and also give our panelists some time. Can you go ahead in the chat function as we move on and chat the most recent move notice that they sent or received? No need to include any PII or any child's information. Maybe just name the state it was from or sent to and how long ago it was. Okay.
Yes, this is a test to make sure no one includes PII.
As a security professional, please don't.
2 weeks ago to Florida. Very good.
Yeah,
All right.
South Dakota last week. Awesome.
All right.
Okay, and the final section I will be talking about today is our MSIX reports. We do think that these are valuable for data specialists to be reviewing on a regular basis. We have a ton of reports in the MSIX system, so we're not going to be able to talk about them all, but I will highlight a couple that we do think especially pertinent to this group. Okay, moving on to the next slide. So the first set of data reports we're going to look at are called our data quality reports. And these provide details on data completeness, data validity, any potential duplicates that are in the system. But the one I want to highlight, and I kind of mentioned earlier, was the file submission report. This is something that we did update back in September, again, based on user feedback. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of the new key functionalities that we added to this report, which I think is super critical for our data specialists to help communicate with their technical points of contact. Okay, go ahead to the next slide. What was that? Okay, so what you see here is kind of the base level file submission report. It gives you the file name, of course, the state, it will say your state there, what date it was received by the MSIX system, how many migratory children student records it contained. So migratory children are the total number of children's records, and then records break down into the number of MDEs. Records rejected full is if the entire child's record was rejected, that will be counted in the records rejected full. And then the records rejected partial, it's a tongue twister right now, is the sum of the invalid MDEs as well as the missing mandatory MDEs. As with most of our reports, there is an export function that's always located in the top right-hand corner. You can export the report and it's either in CSV, which you can then use to manipulate in Excel, or it's in PDF format as well. Okay, and then from here, one of the actual main changes that we did here was we actually changed the sort order. So now that you see the most recent file, your state submitted first. We used to have it where you saw the oldest file. We figured out that wasn't relevant to you. You want to see the most recent. So that's what you see here. It is sorted in descending order. Okay, so when you click on a file name here, you're taken to the next slide, which is the file submission details page. So that we actually have a couple slides here as we couldn't fit all the information on the screen. So this particular example was a file that was submitted to MSIX. This is all from our test environment, so this isn't real, but it was submitted to our test environment November 3rd, 2021. And so what you can see here, some of the file submission details, begin and end date, student count, record count, and file format, as well as the processing information. Did we complete the processing and what day we received it? As you scroll down on that screen, you see this next section, which includes student record details, student count, near match student count, existing student count, and then of course your rejected count. And then finally, as you keep scrolling, you see these two tables. One is a file count table, so it shows you based on the student records submitted, how many of each MDE was submitted, and then how many of those MDEs were loaded with issues. And then we also give you a synopsis of if those MDEs were loaded with issues, what was the issue? Was it invalid format, invalid range or precision, or just an invalid value? So the new feature here is actually in the file counts table. If you select one of the MDE categories, that will actually drill down to yet another page, which if you go to the next slide, here we're looking at the file submission MDE details and on our QAD MDEs. So here you can't see them again, size constraints, but all of the QAD MDEs will be listed. The total number of MDEs will be listed as well if any of the MDEs were missing. And then there's a column for MDEs that were rejected. This means that the MDE was invalid. And with that, the total MDEs rejected, we have 4 reasons why the MDE would be rejected: greater than max length, invalid range, invalid value, etc. And so those last 4 columns are actually a subset of the total MDEs rejected. So this allows you, if you say, hey, I know we submitted this QAD for this child, but I'm not seeing it show up, or kind of any of the other MDEs, you can come to this file report and check out, are we constantly getting a student record rejected? Are we constantly sending MDEs in an invalid format? So we need to go back to our state system. So this report really does allow you to have that communication platform with your technical contacts and allow you to make changes to ensure that your data is being uploaded to MSIX. Okay, move on to the next slide. The other set of reports wanted to highlight today are our work list reports. So these reports provided aggregate information on merges and splits, data requests, and move notices. Let's go ahead and just do a little bit of a deep dive onto the move notice report. So this does include metrics on the volume of move notices broken down by move to and move from notices, the average move notice open and dismissal times, and the number of move notices that are remaining open. This report can be filtered by the creation, the update, the dismissal dates, and whether the move notices were sent or received by your state and their current status. One additional feature here is that you can select a row in the move notice report, and this will actually take you to a drill down page that will provide you specific information such as work list ID, move notice type, the MSIX ID. Both the work list ID and the MSIX ID are selectable and will open the work list history page in a new tab so you can view more details on that work list, as well as the MSIX ID will open the child's consolidated student record so you can view some information that you need about that child. So as a data specialist, we really do encourage you to use this report to monitor move notice trends and dismissal rates to really try to help promote that inter and intrastate coordination for your state. So next, I'm going to hand over the presentation to Michelle and Bruce of Michigan, and they're going to share a little bit of information about the MSIX ID count report.
Thank you very much. So one of the things that we wanted to do with this report is just look at some kind of non-traditional uses of MSIX And one of the things that I always try to focus on is how can data support recruitment. So we've actually are using this report as a data specialist to help support recruitment efforts, given their access to the data and usually their deeper understanding of reporting. So the MSIX ID report, which is available to most MSIX users in each state, to my understanding, can be used to compare child counts in the specific districts in their state. The purpose of this would be to identify trends in identification recruitment and call attention to areas where there may be some recruitment opportunities in your state. So from the reports menu, we would choose the MSIX count report and then MSIX ID count report, and then open up the filters window. Here we would select the performance period as no, and instead use enrollment dates to focus on a specific time frame that you want to look at. I like to run this near the end of each quarter, and we would compare this this current quarter to last year's at the same time to that data. There are different dates and time frames that you can use, but the process would generally be the same when you do this. So you would run the report first for the prior period, so maybe the same period a year ago, making sure to select both states and districts, and then you would just simply run the report again the same way using the time frame in the current year. One of the tricks that I use is I use two different browsers, so I can log in on both on two separate screens, and then I have both reports up at the same time where I can view them together. It makes life a little bit easier. Shell?
Okay.
To the next slide, please.
Yep. Thanks, Bruce. So here we can see the results of 2 different quarters of data for a few districts. If you can see on the right-hand side, we've highlighted the counts which have dropped compared to the same period for the year prior. By clicking on the number, you'll be able to see a list of students that make up that number. Next to each student will be an MSIX ID that is a live link to their student record. By drilling down to the student list for each district, you can examine which students are not present and even click on their MSIX ID to open another window where you can see if there are other enrollments elsewhere. Data specialists can provide their recruitment coordinator a list of students who are not currently enrolled in their state or local district or elsewhere for follow-up. So while recruiters likely could perform these tasks if they have MSIX access, data specialists might have an easier time viewing these larger data sets and might be able to improve communication by working with their recruitment coordinator and providing this valuable data. And like Bruce mentioned at the beginning, we all have a stake in both identification and recruitment and all of the data, regardless of our role in the MEP. I'm not sure who goes next.
There was a question about how you got to that screen.
So yeah, when you go to the reports menu on the left-hand side, and then you would select the MSIX ID count, and then once you run the filters on that stuff, this is a on the left you'll see the 2020 screenshots. It'll look just like that on one screen, and then you'd have to rerun the report and get on the other screen. And as you drill down into those numbers, it'll bring up the more detailed student list. So this is just an excerpt of part of the screen. You won't actually see them side by side. The report is set up to run one time frame at a time. It's not set up as a comparison. So you can do it, like I said, on 2 different screens, or you could download the report into an Excel, export the data, and compare it that way. There's multiple ways to do it. This just kind of shows you in the slide the differences that you're looking for.
Okay. Vaughn, did you want to chime in?
Sure. I think the very first thing that I want to mention is you don't know what you don't know. So the best thing I can suggest you do is, if you've never gone into the reports on MSIX, is just go in and poke around. See what's there. Now you'll see different things depending on what your role is, but go around and not that we all have lots of spare time with nothing to do, but it's a good activity to do, because again, you don't know what you don't know. So there, M6 team has been adding new features to this. You may find some of them useful, some of them may not be useful to you, but you don't know unless you try. So my strongest suggestion is go into the reports and just, when you have a spare 10 minutes, go into the reports menu in M6 and just start checking off the different ones. Go into it, look at the various filters. And if you're not sure how something works, there's 2 suggestions I can give to you. Talk to someone else in your state who maybe is more data prolific than you may be, like you're new and you haven't had a chance to work with it. And of course, there's always the M6 help desk. Reach out to them and say, hey, I'm not sure how this report works. And they're not going to be able to tell you certain things, but they can give you some broad things. But you need to go in and play around. Depending on how technical skilled you are, one of the most powerful things for most of these reports is that it will allow you to export the data, as has been mentioned, and you can take that data if you're have some good technical skills and do all kinds of things with it. Compare it. We didn't talk a whole lot about the child reconciliation, which is one of the most important reports, to make sure that what your data system says matches what M6 says for your child counts, because that's going to be used in the future for our child counts. And what we do in our state is we actually export the data from M6, we export the data from our data system, and we look for comparison. Here are the 10 students that are in M6 that aren't shown on our report. Oh, well, that's because we just completed their COEs today. They haven't been uploaded to M6. Or vice versa. Something shows up in M6 and not in our system. Oh, okay, here's why. Again, that depends on your technical skills, but the bottom line is you got to play around with it. If you don't go in there and look at it, you'll never know what's there.
Well, and I really liked your suggestion about talking to others within your state to find out what they're doing and how they're using it, because each state functions differently with different structures. And Bruce added in the chat about reaching out to folks in other states. Bruce, would you share a little bit more about how you've done that?
I think it's a matter of taking advantage of every opportunity to meet new people in these types of sessions. We have in the beginning all those states and people put us where they're from, and grabbing some of those contacts. And there's a lot of folks out there that are willing to share what they're doing. Same thing when you go to conferences in person, face-to-face, attending other state conferences, their state conferences, anytime where you can get in touch with people and ask them questions and bounce ideas. It's the migrant education program seems to be a really nice community where everybody's willing to share and work together. We all have that common goal. And I think a certain type of people do this job, and that lends itself to networking very easily.
That's really good, Bruce. Thank you. And it's actually pretty easy to find people in the migrant education community. If you just go Google, John Doe from Missouri migrant education, the state websites are pretty good about listing contacts and being able to find them. And some users in M6 can actually find the email address of other users in M6. So even if you don't have that capability, someone in your state has that capability to be able to look up and say that I interacted with this other user, I want to contact them about this specific issue. We can look up their email address for sure. And you could contact me or the help desk, and we'd be happy to do some research and find out some more information. So we had a couple slides. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, Ben, also with that, especially for your work list items, your near matches, your merges and splits, a lot of these are two-step processes. Somebody has to initiate and then somebody has to validate it. Those will have your kind of partner states, the other parties that will be working with you to complete that. Their phone numbers and their email addresses are listed on your work list ID. So always recommend if something's kind of sitting outstanding or there was something going on on with a student record, that there maybe was some conflicting information, that information's is there. Go ahead and reach out. And then again, as we mentioned, the data request and move notices have those correspondence features. I know in the chat we were talking about how critical it is, instead of just going in and dismissing the move notice, just throw a comment in there when you go to dismiss it. Hey, thank you. We got this. We're working on it. Or even if the child was identified and recruited and enrolled, let them know. You can also go check the child's consolidated student record, but just a little note if you have it, that's great. An extra minute could really help another state's program.
All right, so we had a couple of slides about the dashboards, but I think in the interest of time, we're going to skip those ones and go to the Q&A. I know we've been addressing a lot of the questions already. Were there any other questions from anyone in the audience that you'd like to ask, or maybe that you asked already and we didn't answer? I know the chat was moving pretty fast. I tried to answer as many as possible. I see Aurelie said that she's taken advantage of conferences and scheduled visits the day before the conference to meet the state's MEP staff, and she highly recommends doing that. Excellent, Aurelie, doing that networking, which can be tough to do sometimes. All right. So, any other questions?
And if you're wondering and you're thinking, okay, we're almost out of time, so I want to ask a question. We're gonna, if we have questions, we have OME and we've got MSIX and everybody on here, we feel like it's definitely worth the time. So we may delay the other session for 10 minutes or so if people have questions. So feel free to put those in the chat box if you have any.
So Abby did ask a question about the state ID and the alternative ID. So that's actually how it's submitted by your state. Those are both MDEs. And so the state ID will come up as the state ID, MDE, and the alternative ID will be in the alternative ID, and you'll search that way. Most of the ones that you see in our system, most when you go to search and you're looking at the consolidated student record, those are state IDs. But some states do use the alternative ID to differentiate between a child enrolled in a school, and there's other reasons that the state uses it. We've gotten this question a lot, and I know OME has taken into consideration of having the parent contact information be an MDE. So,
and the qualifying activity I see Michelle put out there. And so next year, we are actually going to be publishing a formal notice asking for comments from the field, from the migrant education field, about MDEs that should be added, removed, or changed. And so while we do collect feedback at moments like this, we're taking notes and writing these things down and keeping a record of what people say, that publication in the Federal Register, which we'll send out through the state directors, and hopefully they disseminate to everyone in their states, is a really important time for everyone to comment on the MDEs in that formal fashion. And qualifying activity is one we've heard a lot. Kim says, I've received move notices that state the student moved to New Jersey, but when I check the data, the student moved from New Jersey to another state. Any way to correct that information? Yes, Kim, you could definitely contact the help desk if you feel that information is incorrect. And the help desk can work on either contacting the person who put in the incorrect information or correcting it themselves.
One thing to note actually with just the move notice, if you got an incorrect move notice, one of the best ways to let them know is just to let the state know that the child move someplace else. And so in the correspondence feature, if it's not actually something wrong with the data itself, it was just an incorrect notification, that correspondence feature is super helpful to let them know, hey, this child didn't come here. I believe they moved here. And that state can then communicate with the location where the child did move.
We get that sometimes as well, where the family just changed plans, from the time they left to the time they were supposed to get here. And we often just send another notice. I mean, you can send a notice to the state where if we make contact with the family and they're in Tennessee, then we'll just send it to Tennessee.
And I see Abby said she gives her own cell and email so that she can share the last known numbers with people. And LaRonda commented about adding back the birth state and country. That's an interesting one. It's a really sensitive subject for people in the field. I know there's a lot of people who are uncomfortable giving that information and they feel it could be, it's sometimes used against them. Now, there are rules about who OME can give the data to. We don't just give the data to anyone who asks for it, but there are concerns. There are legitimate concerns about having that information in a federal database somewhere. And that was the reason behind stopping the collection of those pieces of information. So we hear you, and we do understand that they can be useful, but the risks seem to have outweighed the rewards on that one. But we are continuously reevaluating it though. So we appreciate if that's something that's needed. Please let us know and we'll take that into account. Yes, thank you, LaRonda. Okay, any other?
Not sure that I understood your question. Is there any kind of additional details you could provide what it meant putting, states can't put in enrollments other than for their own state. So the consolidated student record will show all enrollments, but Texas can only submit enrollments for Texas, Illinois for Illinois, and so on and so forth.
Sarah, I can tell you because Tonda's from Michigan. It's in reference to occasionally we go into MSIX and you'll see that a student, say perhaps they're based out of North Carolina and they might currently be in Michigan. However, they're showing that they're present in North Carolina at the same time. And so I think that's something, I mean, we could definitely address, in our state as we better understand that and get that to our locals. But that's what she's asking.
Yep, I would recommend then if you're kind of seeing that, it just may be like a data oversight or something like that. Again, those communication features, reaching out to the state to say, hey, I see this is in there. These are conflicting. The child's present in our state. We just did a residency verification. You update your data or send that move notice to say, hey, the child is in my state, or a data request also.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with that, we should wrap things up so everyone can get on with their days. Jessica, thank you so much for letting us share. And
we want to say thank you for you guys all, all answering questions and just being willing to share. I feel like states are very interested, and all of us are on so many different levels of how long we've been with the program. So Vaughn, Michelle, Sarah, Bruce, everybody, thanks for your time today. And so for those of you that are going to the next session, we'll open that up here in the next minute or two, and we'll go ahead and get started. And we are recording this, and we will post it on our website and also on the Whova platform so you can have that. So thank you, everybody, and really appreciate your time and effort.